I will give you another break. This is the bathroom break, a little bit longer. You need to face some stuff in too, but let's turn your attention back to Space Militarization. We're still on this section about overviewing of space assets. So we've had one section about revolutionary military affairs, one section about the overview of space assets. It's very important to know that this is where the debate comes in. It is unquestionably truly valuable to our U.S. military to be a leader, to have our military assets in space. Okay? Nobody doubts that. Even the critics of space militarization talk about how important those capabilities are. But where the debate comes into play is how vulnerable we also become to having so much of our military posturing reliant on those space assets. So it is important to note there's this logjam of necessity, the good stuff that the military space assets bring to us in conjunction with the vulnerabilities it also brings. Joseph Huntington, who is a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Air Force, states this: U.S. space systems provide a host of critical capabilities in all types of warfare. That's a pretty bold statement from a lieutenant colonel. Critical capabilities in all types of warfare to maintain a combat advantage over our adversaries. However, Huntington says today's space infrastructure is largely unprotected and is vulnerable to attack by potential adversaries. They can employ a variety of means which could damage or disrupt satellite operations, from simple jamming of the signals to physical destruction. Okay, so we've got all of these satellites up in outer space, for example, but they're very much unprotected from even simplistic damage and despair. If you're interested, that's from a book literally called Military Satellites. Pretty okay book. I've got others that I'll recommend more so as the lecture goes on.
Who's the author again?
Joseph Huntington. Let's talk a little bit about anti-satellites or ASATs, which is a huge part of the space militarization debate. That's why it gets its own Roman numeral, its own section. Okay? We're going to talk about what they are, what are ASATs, who has them, what forms they come in, and what ASATs, the consequences of the fact that they exist. So first, let's talk about what are they? What are ASATs? We do really call, that's going to be a comment. People don't say out the whole thing, anti-satellite weapon systems, ASATs. Okay, what are they? They're designed to incapacitate, meaning no longer functional, or completely destroy. Incapacitate or destroy satellites for military purposes. They're anti-satellites. They're weapons, and we use that term a little bit loosely, but technology used to either disable other countries' military satellites or to destroy them. And the technology, the ASATs come in a wide range of different ways and possibilities that countries can utilize to disable, destroy, incapacitate, whatever, other countries' satellites. Okay? This is what is classified as a formable weapon. Now, a lot of these can't literally kill somebody. We often think of weapons as something that you trigger and it kills somebody, but anti-satellites are classified as a weapon oftentimes, even though it could just be a laser beam that jams the signal. Okay? We're going to talk about who has them. 3 countries are believed to have known to have ASAT technology, let me back up, ASAT programs. Lots of countries are believed to have some form of even simplistic ASAT technology, because it can be very low form like laser beams. Okay, well, I say low form, it's not like I could design a laser beam in my condo back in Chicago, but there are lots of nation states that have very, very low capacity to disable or alter or distort satellite information. But 3 countries are known to have ASAT programs: United States, Russia, and China. Some important dates. In September of 1985, we've had ASAT programs for a while, but in September 1985 is when it became public. We destroyed one of our own satellites using ASAT capabilities on purpose. The satellite was no longer functioning, and so to test our ASATs, we destroyed one of our own satellites. Does that make sense? Because to test an ASAT by destroying somebody else's satellite probably wouldn't go over too well. But we destroyed one of our own satellites that were not functioning using, if any of you all are typed, there was the ASM-135 anti-satellite missile. the ASM-135 anti-satellite missile. More recently, in January 2007, China shocked the world by also destroying one of its own orbiting satellites. And really kind of not as much as Sputnik did back in the 1950s, because we're not as fearful as China as we were the Soviet Union back then, but kind of sent some shockwaves, because to have the capability of destroying these satellites also meant that China had lots of other military capabilities. Yes?
When did China do that?
2007, very recently.
And then when did you do ours?
1985. Yes?
Didn't we shoot one down in the night?
Possibly. I just wrote down shooting down one of our own.
Yeah.
We actually have done that once we made it public that we had them back in 1985, we've been doing it. That's how we get rid of our old satellites now. Okay? Roger Launius, L-A-U-N-I-U-S, from the Smithsonian states that the Chinese event in 2007, so just one ASAT test of China destroying its own missile, added more than 2,000 pieces of space junk, or space debris to low Earth orbit. We're going to talk about space debris later. Okay? There's lots of trash floating around in space, and a lot of that is due to our space militarization posturing. That one event, 2,000 pieces of space junk floating around the Earth, it was about 30% of the total amount of debris at the time. So one satellite explosion, okay, now at the time in 2007 constituted 30% of the space junk floating around in space. Okay, so it's a pretty big deal. We're going to talk about space debris momentarily. Here's a picture of the ASAT that we launched in 1985. So that missile was launched to destroy our own satellite in 1985.
The first weakness, the U.S. military's dependence on satellites. If hostilities broke out, experts say China could take out dozens of American reconnaissance or communications satellites within hours. Then,
We simply couldn't function. You couldn't get data through, you couldn't get voice communications, you couldn't get any kind of telecommunications. You couldn't see the power space.
We all
the
have that
second
black
weakness,
dead love.
vulnerability. Experts say many American GPS satellites, which guide smart weapons and troop movements, are more than 1,000 miles into space, mostly out of range of China's ballistic missiles. But the reconnaissance satellites, which take pictures of the targets for those bombs, missiles, and soldiers, are sitting ducks.
Our imagery intelligence satellites are in orbit only a few hundred miles up, the same altitude as the target satellite the Chinese shot down.
And experts tell us the reconnaissance satellites the U.S. military does have are too big, about the size of a city bus, easy targets. They say efforts are underway to make them smaller and to equip satellites with stealth technology. How can the U.S. go on the offensive? Like China, experts say the U.S. can jam satellites by throwing noise at them and can hit them with ballistic missiles. Ground-based lasers have also been tested. And an analyst with Jane's Defense Weekly believes U.S. military planners are at least thinking of developing satellites with attack capability. How could one of these orbiters blast another from space?
It can dock with it and damage it in some way, or it can obliterate it by shooting pellets or some kind of munition.
But that creates its own dangers. Scientists are already warning that satellite China just destroyed could have broken into about 40,000 pieces, which can travel at high speed through orbit for as long as a decade and can damage several other satellites. Brian Todd, CNN, Washington.
I think pretty easy. This is the red, shows the orbiting patterns of some of the key pieces of space junk from that one Chinese satellite destruction. We're actually going to watch a video a little bit later on about space debris that'll talk a little bit more about that. Okay, what forms do ASATs come in? We've already seen, obviously, we heard about lasers and different types of weapons. I can't remember if I've got a slide for this or not. No. Okay, you're going to have to write these down, so I'll try to go slow. The first form is a kinetic weapon. K-I-N-E-T-I-C, a kinetic weapon. This can destroy or cripple a satellite by collision with the missile. So that 1985 missile, that picture we showed, is now a kinetic weapon. We literally send a missile up, destroy the satellite. Causes lots of debris, Okay, that's a huge, huge kind of disadvantage. It's not just that space junk floating around is harmful for the environment, but from a military purpose, okay, that debris can cause other issues with our other military satellites. It can block views, it can destroy other satellites unintentionally, and so forth. It can cause miscalculations. People can think debris is a weapon or something else that another country may be targeting at us. We'll talk about that later. Okay? Number two, the second form is a laser. Lasers can either be beamed up from the Earth or from space. So we can have things in space that shoot lasers at other people's satellites, or we can beam it up from Earth. That obviously is not going to destroy the satellite, like make it break up, but it's going to disable its functioning capabilities. It depends. There's I don't know who asked that question. There are very low-level, unsophisticated lasers that it's just a temporary, like matter of seconds of distorting images and so forth. Lots of nation-states have that capability. Okay, but there's the higher, more sophisticated ones that are in some more developed ASAT programs can certainly disable for a lot longer period of time. The third function is radio jamming. We heard a little about that in the program, the sending of sound. Okay, that jams, it can overwhelm a satellite. If the satellite's getting, too much data from the noise from the jamming, maybe the satellite is one of those satellites that picks up sounds from, the Earth. All of that can cause it to overwhelm and malfunction. The fourth is a cyber attack, literally from our internet and the cyber capabilities that we have, can also jam and distort that data. We haven't seen a lot of that. We don't know because that's such a new area for our military. A lot of that information would obviously still be classified. So those are the four functions, okay, four forms, that ASATs take place in. Kinetic weapons, lasers, radio jamming, and then the fourth one, cyber. You may want to jot this down. Governments do worry about a fifth potential one, and it's for the basis of our movies, I guess, and that is high-altitude nuclear explosions. Okay? So sending nuclear devices up into space at very high altitudes would create kind of an electromagnetic pulse field, an EMP field, that would destroy lots of satellites in a very large range. So you get a lot more bang for your buck, I guess, in regards to that type of capability, because you can destroy over a much greater path. So lots of satellites that may be in a belt to be destroyed by a high-altitude nuclear explosion. Yes?
Do you know how big the EMP field of effect is?
I have no idea. I don't even know if I could tell you more than 2 sentences what an EMP field is. Okay? So, okay. Questions about what forms they come in? Sorry that I have such a flippant answer, but I usually process information on a topic like this for debate purposes. I don't have a lot of scientific background. There are three consequences that ASAT can cause for us. The first is miscalculation. A lot of you all heard about the hair trigger alerts last night in the Space Militarization debate. Okay. Anti-satellite capabilities can actually make us do one of two things. Okay? And miscalculation can refer to us thinking that somebody else is shooting a missile at us. Okay? And thinking that something offensive is coming, but it also, miscalculation can be an accidental launch, in the sense of just a miscalculation of numbers, not just misassuming that something is coming at us, but something malfunctioning. Okay? If war is imminent, meaning, war is coming, it seems possible that an enemy of the U.S. might seek to cripple our military satellites. So if we're engaged in war with North Korea, let's say, we would imagine that North Korea would try to cripple our military satellites. However, we also might mistake some of that ASAT technology that's aimed at crippling our satellites as being an actual offensive weapon aiming towards the United States. There have been lots of instances in U.S. military history where we've been really close to much larger impacts because we've misinterpreted a threat. And we've misinterpreted a threat. Okay, so that's the first consequences of ASAT. The second consequence, there's a little thing about miscalculation. Can you all see what's in the mirror here? An airplane. 9 out of 10 times, miscalculation doesn't matter, but that 1 out of 10 times sure is a kicker. And so when we're talking about offensive capabilities and ICBMs, you don't want as small a percentage of miscalculation as possible. The second consequence is space debris, which we've already talked about a little bit. We're going to talk more about it in